that Afghanistan's major problem is not its international recognition; it is domestic recognition. Russia wanted a close relationship with the Taliban from day one, primarily to keep America at bay, to keep the U.S. Less involved. China and Russia, and to an extent Iran, these three countries in the region have a US focused policy mostly when it comes to Afghanistan. Women in Afghanistan are going through hell. They can Girls cannot go to school above grade of 6. That's why they come to Pakistan. That's why they go to Iran. I don't think that my colleagues in Kabul can talk to somebody like me who is probably professionally critical of the Taliban. I think exclusion of Afghan women from the workforce costing the Afghan economy $1 billion a year.
Hello, I'm Mariba Tirmizi and you're watching WNN. Today we have former director Tolo News, founder and CEO of Amu TV and sole Afghan journalist invited to civil society discussions with the Taliban in Doha and Oslo. We have with us Lutfullah Najafzadeh. Thank you, sir. Welcome to WNN. Thank you for joining us today. First off, recently a very big development took place where Russia recognized the Taliban regime. What impact do you think would it have on the Afghan society and people?
I think the decision by the Russian Federation to recognize the Taliban government as a representative of the representative government of Afghanistan is something bold. Is something that no other country in the world in the past 4 years dared to do it, not including those who recognized the Taliban in the first uh, during the first time in power 25 years ago. So this is a very security centric decision. One, second, also I think Moscow is looking at Afghanistan from a geopolitical perspective. And this is going to have certain impacts, I think, on countries in the region as well. But one has to say that Afghanistan's major problem is not its international recognition; it is domestic recognition. I think the domestic legitimacy is something that the Taliban lack, and they have failed to come up with a constitution. They have failed to come up with a vision for the future. They have failed to come up to include the Afghan people in governance and in government, and that is, I would say, number one, challenge for the Taliban regime at the moment.
Right. So in the last Taliban regime, there were only limited countries that recognized the Taliban government, including Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Do you think this step of Russia would this step of Russia serve as a starting point for other regional countries to accept the Taliban government?
I think the Taliban-Russia relationship goes back to the 20 years of American war in Afghanistan, and Russian uh, embassy and their involvement in the country somehow included the Taliban. As you remember, Taliban delegations were going to Moscow for high-profile talks before the collapse of the Republic government. And therefore, this is no surprise that Russia wanted a close relationship with the Taliban from day one, primarily to keep America at bay, to keep the US less involved. Um, but the Taliban, who's been trying to advocate for more of a balanced foreign policy relationship, I don't know what does that mean. Uh, it would be difficult for them now, sort of, to manage the international relationship. It is also making life quite more difficult for them. Yes, I mean, some countries in the region could sort of look at Russia and say, okay, somebody took the lead and we will do the same. But I think every country has to look at it from their own national security point of view, as well as what benefits their historic long-term relationship with the Afghan people. We live in the region. We will be neighbors forever. I think countries in the region, like Pakistan and others, Iran, Central Asian states, they have to look at the implications of their relationship, of their decisions, and their relationship with the Afghan people long term, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years down the road. Look at Afghanistan's decision not to recognize Pakistan in 1947, right? And our government back then made a decision, a political decision, and we are paying the price 70, 80 years later. So it's very important, I think, that countries with deep ties, people to people contacts, have to have to sort of evaluate some of these relationships, and see what kind of impact would it have on the people long term.
And Pakistan and Taliban relations were strained, as we have seen in the past. Pakistan accused Taliban of harboring and providing safe havens to terrorist groups and also conducted airstrikes across the border. But now it seems that there is some normalization, if you will, in the ties. China also played a role in the trilateral dialogue. So, what is the future of Pak Taliban relations? How do you see it?
I think China is China and Russia, and to an extent Iran. These three countries in the region have a U.S. focused policy mostly when it comes to Afghanistan. They don't want the Taliban to get close to the United States. They don't want the U.S. to sort of come back in some form or shape to the country. You know that President Trump is saying that, we want background back. We shouldn't have left it. The way the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan was disastrous. These comments, I don't know how much it would really affect the future of U.S. Afghanistan relationship, but it is certainly an alarming point for some of these countries in the region who do not want a return of the U.S., particularly in some sort of security and military fashion. So that's why I think China is also very much in the lead in the region, trying to sort of maintain this consensus, particularly with Pakistan being such an important neighbor and player when it comes to Afghan politics. That's why I think China is leading these trilateral discussions, and I think the Taliban, of course, demand certain ease of sanctions, and travel, whether those are travels or the assets. Some of them the region can help, but some cannot because these go back to Western powers.
Right, and it's interesting that you brought India into the discussion. So, what level of ingress do you think that India can exert on Taliban, and how effective is it going to be?
I think Taliban is way friendlier towards India than a lot of us expected. I think they are trying to balance between India and Pakistan. And I'm not sure if that is possible, given that these are two different neighbors, different levels of influence, and different history when it comes to their relationship with Afghanistan. But there are certain groups within the Taliban, particularly Mullah Yaqub and others, who have been, also Siraj Haqqani, who have been quite open, towards Indian engagement. And India has reopened the embassy at a technical level. There are senior level conversations between the Taliban and India. Jay Shankar and Muttaqi spoke. They have also met at cabinet level in the past. So this is I think probably something that Pakistan is watching closely and with careful eyes.
I can completely understand. And, we get to hear all sorts of news from different sources. But I personally want to ask you, what is the current state of press freedom, human rights, and, especially education when it comes to girls' education in Afghanistan? How's the situation right now?
This is a catastrophe, the best I can explain. The women in Afghanistan are going through hell. They can Girls cannot go to school above grade of 6. That's why they come to Pakistan. That's why they go to Iran. They don't come to Pakistan and Iran for luxury life. They come to these countries for very basic, human rights. And that's why it's painful when we see that even that is taken away from them in a very difficult way. And I think the Taliban are trying to erase women from public life. And also, when it comes to media and press freedom, they are also trying to control the space as much as possible. I don't know if you have heard stories or the news from the past 2 years that they have introduced a very restrictive measure to control talk shows. For instance, the similar conversation that you and I are having, I don't think that my colleagues in Kabul can talk to somebody like me who is probably professionally critical of the Taliban. Um, and uh, and and this is very difficult, I think, for all of us, particularly for those of us in the media sector who invested a lot in this, and now we're seeing that the Taliban are trying to undo this.
And it seems that Taliban have full control over the Afghan society, and we've seen them exercising authority. Do you foresee any betterment in the overall human rights situation in Afghanistan right now?
No, it's difficult. It's a difficult situation. I don't think they are even willing to talk about it now. I think it's a very much a kind of hard decision. That's what we hear and we've been told. And every time we talk to a Taliban minister or a Taliban official, uh, even when officials from Pakistan and other places go talk to them, and they specifically mention that this is something that we can't do anything about it.
Right. In Pakistan and Iran have hosted the Afghan refugees for decades now. So we're seeing that a repatriation process is underway. What is your perspective on how this whole repatriation process is going to affect the situation of Afghan refugees?
I have to be very honest with you that the timing is very wrong, and uh, every Afghan citizen appreciate, respect, and are indebted to the Pakistani people, to the Iranian people for their hospitality for decades. That's one thing. And a lot of us, including our families and others, have lived in either of the countries for years. So we understand the goodwill of the nations of Pakistan and Iran. But when it comes to politicizing the question of refugees for political gain every now and then, I think that is what that is for domestic politics in these countries, or when it comes to their foreign policy in regards to Afghanistan. I think that is what is not aligned with the goodwill of the people of the nations of these two countries. So I think the timing is wrong. I think that the way it's conducted is wrong. I think it is affecting that goodwill, and it's affecting the basically the hundreds of thousands of people who literally have nowhere to go.
Do you think that Russia took this step in a hurry that we first talked about? Rather, Taliban could have been pressured on to improve the press freedom, human rights, and girls' education in return of getting legitimacy.
I think we want our friends in the region, particularly our neighbors, to prioritize human rights in their engagement and their discussions with Kabul. because human rights is not only an Afghan women's or Afghan people's rights. It's human rights. It's very clear in the word and the phrase itself. So that's why I think it's important that we hear this more and more from players and countries in the region. The region should not be dealing with the Taliban in a very transactional, day-to-day, security-focused way. Yes, they may save your day. That may save your day, but that will not save our collective future, right? You will you will have more people who will sympathize with TTP if there are one jihadi madrasa in every Afghan district. You will have millions of people coming to Pakistan as refugees in one way or the other in the years to come. If there is no economic opportunity in the country, if people are not educated, if people don't, are not able to go to work, particularly half of the society, I think exclusion of Afghan women from the workforce costing the Afghan economy $1 billion a year. So this is also directly linked to security, prosperity, and economic relationship of Afghanistan and countries in the region. So it's important, and I think it's helpful if countries like Pakistan and others also include human rights. So human rights does not remain only a Western concern. That is the Taliban's interpretation. The more they hear it from West alone and not from the region, then they will say, look, this is part of the Western propaganda, which is not the case, right? We want, I don't, I want nothing more than an Afghan male journalist like yourself sitting in Kabul and asking exactly the same questions from a Pakistani expert, right? We don't want to bring American lifestyle to Afghanistan. I mean, we're an ancient country. We have our own traditions and way of life, and historically have been very free people. So that freedom should not be curbed and taken away, and we want the region to understand that.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And thank you so much, Mr. Najafzadeh, for joining us today and, shining light on the current situation in Afghanistan. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching WNN. I'll see you next time. Take care.